verse 24. You can get that ready. What page? Benji, what page do you have there?
972 in the
972. Right. So, are you ready for the Word of God? Yeah? He's not ready. He's getting himself ready. Well, while Ed is getting himself ready, 2,000 years ago, in a remote part of the world, an obscure carpenter turned rabbi, anybody know who I'm talking about? He walked on a shore of a lake, and there, waiting at the lake, busy doing their things, were two fishermen, very ordinary men named Peter and Andrew. And he said to them, do you remember the words? There they are there. He said, follow me. Follow me. And they left their nets, and they left their boat, and they left their jobs, and they followed him. And then he came to two more fishermen, two brothers this time, James and John, and that same cryptic invitation, follow me. And they left their boats and they followed him. And one day he came to a tax collector, kind of a despised profession in that day, a man named Levi, and he said those same two words, just this, follow me. Levi got up and he left his desk and he left his profession and he left his whole way of life and he followed this man. And we wonder in these stories, at least I do, what else Jesus might have said or what else these people might have known about them. But the stories don't tell us because they only want to focus on this single command, on those two words that we read. This man, whatever you might think of him, walked around issuing what might be called the grand invitation. Follow me. Sometimes people would say yes, and for them that meant many things: high adventure, learning, poverty, suffering, very frequent failure, meaning, hope, ultimately death. Everybody's going to die, by the way. The only real question is if you found anything worth dying for. Sometimes he would issue this invitation and people would say no. Maybe that meant security or comfort. We don't know because we've never heard from those people again. But for the last 5 months, can you believe it's been 5 months that we've been on this journey together? As a church, we've been on this journey through what has been the most impactful talk in history, whatever you might think of it. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. Not my words, the words of Jesus, okay? Because Jesus gave it on a little mountain and not a horseback, okay? All of those months have pointed toward this moment, toward this talk, toward this weekend for you. And at the end of Jesus' message, having announced what he called his great good news, that life with God, in the presence of God, is in God's favor, in God's care, in God's forgiveness, is now available to anybody, available to you, available to people in the world, okay? Available to those that the world had even written off. Blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are those who mourn if they want to be. And having brilliantly described what it is that makes somebody a truly good person from the inside, yes, you remember we've been exploring that? After explaining why, in the care of his magnificent Father positioned among us, you simply have nothing ultimately to worry about, nothing to be afraid of, and having articulated how it is really the love of God expressed through the golden rule. We did that one recently, that is the foundation of reality that is most real. Jesus devotes the last portion of his talk that Benji read to clarifying for people the great decision of life. And what is that? Will you become his disciple or not? And I want today to take any fuzziness, because sometimes there's a bit of fuzziness when you hear that word disciple, isn't there? Especially in our modern day, it seems to have lost some of its power and meaning. But I want to take out of this word disciple any fuzziness that might exist, because a lot of people are fuzzy about it. Many people think that the job of the church is to make Christians. You hear that one? To make Christians, and they think that Christians are people who hold certain beliefs, particularly certain beliefs about Jesus, and that as long as they affirm the right beliefs or trust in those beliefs in the right way, they get to be forgiven and have to be allowed into heaven one day, okay, when they die. They just simply have to be. And then that's what they think is the difference between a Christian and somebody who's not a Christian. And so they never deal with the fundamental choice, which is, do I actually intend to do everything that this man Jesus taught? Do I intend to follow him? Like those disciples who accepted his invitation to follow him. Do I intend to follow him? Jesus never said, become a Christian. He never said that. John, how could you say that? He never. Go read it for yourselves. Jesus never said, become a Christian to anybody. The word Christian is used in the Bible. You want to venture a guess how many times it appears in the Bible? He's got the answer. Put your answer down. Anybody want to venture another guess if you haven't seen Tim's hands?
I was going to guess one.
You say 11? Never? It does. More than once? More than twice?
3 times.
3 times, man. Put you out of your misery. Okay, it is used in the Bible only 3 times. Now, I'm not saying don't call yourself a Christian. I'm a Christian, okay? I'm not ashamed of that, okay? But when it appeared in the Bible only 3 times, it was used as a little nickname for disciples. It was a little nickname. The word disciple, though, is used 269 times in the Bible, and it is simply a learner or a student or an apprentice or a follower. There's no vagueness. There's nothing mysterious or fuzzy about it, okay? If you are a learner, guess what? You know it. If you want to learn golf, like we did the other day, if you want to learn golf and how to speak Spanish or how to do brain surgery, then you become a student of somebody. Yes? Through lessons or YouTube videos or a book, you choose in an appropriate way to be with them. Yeah, to be with them, to learn from them how to do what they do, how to become like them. And guess what? You know if you're doing this or not. If somebody asks you, are you learning to do brain surgery? Nobody says, well, I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Maybe. You may not be a good student, but you know if you're a student or not a student. Okay? So the question is, are you a disciple of Jesus? Have you chosen above all else to follow this man, to identify with him, to do what he says to do, and what he says and how he says to live as he would live if he were you? This is really, really important as we consider this, as you consider this. The kingdom will open itself up to you, up to them, because they had chosen to be with him, to learn from him, how to become like him. And of course, in our day, he is no longer physically present in the body. Okay? And that's different. But that's a really good thing. Remember, if you've been a part of this series, part of what Jesus taught is what is most real is unseen. He says a number of times, when you do things, your heavenly Father who is unseen sees what is done in secret. He sees, he knows what is not physically visible, what it is you think and feel way down on the inside. He sees and knows this. That's where ultimate reality lies. And Jesus will be with you if you want him to, if you ask him to. And so the fundamental decision, Jesus says, that faces you is if you want to be a disciple. And if you do, you will actually do what he says to do. Simple as that. That you will obey him. And that is an old word, the word obey. Okay, obedience is another word that maybe needs to be deconstructed a little bit here. Okay, because we all have wrong ideas about what Jesus taught sometimes. Obedience, that word obedience, is often thought to be kind of a bad word in our day. Okay, it's generally not a compliment to be called obedient. Yeah, that Tim is so obedient. In our day, it's not generally a compliment. Okay, teachers will praise their kids by saying to their parents, your child is a leader, your child is a risk taker, your child is gifted or they're talented. That's, I'm still waiting for the teachers to say that about my kids. I'm joking. They already are. Where we live, obedience is so poorly thought of that one of the great compliments in our day is to be disruptive. You ever hear that term, especially in business? This guy is a disruptor. In the business world, that's a good thing, right? I heard about one teacher telling a set of parents, your child is disruptive, and they were high-fiving each other. Woo! They didn't realize that it was not intended to be a compliment in that particular situation. Okay, obedience school is for dogs. To be obedient conjures up somebody who's just robotic or compliant or weak-willed or a weak-willed conformist. And of course, Jesus wanted none of those for his disciples, none of those for his believers. Jesus did not say, I have come that you might be a weak-willed conformist and do whatever you're told by anybody for no good reason at all. He never said those words or anything like it. A disciple is someone who seeks to obey Jesus with creativity and imagination and initiative and discernment and with great boldness, joyfully, not grudgingly, not out of necessity, not because it's a rule, but with growing ease as the power of God to transform gets into what the Apostle Paul called the members of your body. In your little hands. Okay, what they do, in your little feet and where they go, in your little eyes and what they see, in your little mouth and what it speaks, into the habits that mostly make you up. When this happens, you still with me, by the way? You're allowed to smile. This is good news I'm giving to you, right? Not bad news. When this happens, obedience, life, creativity, joy, and love flow out of you quite increasingly, naturally, with constant humility, as you realize the only way to live in the kingdom of God is with daily manna. That is a reprieve from the disaster that would otherwise be your ego and sin. With great courage, for it will often mean standing in non-compliance under great pressure that the world will put on you. With moments of great inspiration when you are gripped by the realization that the only explanation for his unprecedented impact is that he is the most magnificent human being who has ever lived, and it is the greatest opportunity for any human being who has ever come along to become his friend. To identify with him, to stand alongside him, to be taken up into what he is doing in this great world that he created, and that no matter what else happens in your life, you cannot miss out on that. At the end of this great talk that Jesus gave, Jesus presses urgently for a decision from every listener to his grand invitation. And he says, you are at the crossroads. That means you. You are at the crossroads Know it or not. You either choose the narrow gate. Do you remember that talk? You either choose the narrow gate that is obedience to Him in all things. I will seek to understand and with His help do whatever He says above everything else. Or you will choose the broad gate. And that's just simply anything else. Whatever that is, it doesn't matter. You will either become a good tree that is flowing with so much inner goodness, that ceaseless flow of thoughts and feelings and intentions and desires inside of you that nobody else can see will become so good they will eventually issue forth into words and actions and generosity that will make other people, when they look at you, say, "What a good God God must be to have created somebody like Him." Somebody like that. Or you'll rot. And ego and self and pride and smallness and pettiness and greed and bitterness and anger will make you worthless to yourself and anybody else. You will do the will of His Father, which is goodness and joy and peace and love, and you will live. Or you will not do that will. You will choose another will. Your will. And perish. You stand at a great crossroads. Every single one of us are standing at this crossroads. This is Jesus. And now these are His final words in this talk that Benji read for us earlier. There it is. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Let's read those words for a moment while I pause. In the eyes of Jesus, there is no good reason to not do what He said to do, because what He tells us to do is the best. Rightly understood, is just the best. It's not compliance, it's not mechanical, it's not a rule book. It requires discernment and judgment. It means becoming a person radiant with goodness. It's just the best. No good reason not to do it. Imagine, you still with me? Imagine you applied to and got accepted at the greatest company in the world, okay? And I'm not going to tell you what that company is. Just imagine you know what that company is, right? And you report on day one to the CEO, and he's not just a brilliant leader and a creative wizard. He is deeply, deeply invested in your personal development in this company. And he says to you, I want you to work on this project. I want you to develop this competence. I want you to build this team. Lokesh, you've heard these words, right? I want you to build this team. I want you to take care of this client so that you can become a magnificent contributor. You say, no. Imagine if you did that, hey? He works at a big company, that's why I'm picking on him. No, I don't intend to do what you tell me to do. I want to be on staff. Yes, I want to get paid. I want to have an office. I would love to get a bonus, and I want to receive all the company benefits, okay? But I want to do what I want to do. How long do you think you would last there? 3 months. I would say probably less. Imagine, now where's Solly? Footballer right there, okay? Won't tell you which team he supports. But imagine you got selected to be part of the greatest team in history. He already knows which team he's thinking of, right? The greatest team in the history of athletic competition. And the manager is not just a strategic genius and an inspirational figure. He is deeply committed to your excelling. And he says, I want you to do this training. I want you to watch these games on YouTube. I want you to practice these exercises, okay, in your spare time. I want you to serve this team. And you say, no, 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 no. I want to be on the roster, absolutely. I want to keep the championship trophy at my house, okay? I want to have the kit or the shirt. Okay, I want to get the advertising endorsements out there, but I don't intend to do what you tell me to do. How long would you last on the greatest team in the history of the world? Anybody? Now imagine standing before Jesus on one day and trying to explain to him why you did not ever fully intend to do all that he said to do. Maybe you have a good reason for that, and his fairness, understanding, and his compassion, that is who Jesus is such that, of course, you can rely on that as part of the ultimate reality. But people far wiser than me, in his way, will tell you that selective obedience will simply not usher you into a life of full confidence in this man. Selective obedience just won't. There's a line in the big book of the AA. Now, I've studied some of their work over the years, and these are people who know that they stand at the great crossroads between life and death. Okay? This is no joke for them. This is what it says. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. To make our condition clear, to make this decision as urgent and undismissible as possible, as he does so often, Jesus tells a story. And these are actually two little stories that we've just read. And the way to understand them, the two stories that Benji read for us earlier, the way to understand them is you kind of set them side by side and you look at what is similar in each story, and then you look at what's the variable. Okay? Where is the difference? When you locate the difference, you get the point. And in these stories, these two stories, everybody builds a house. That's not a variable. You could replace the word house with the word life. Yeah? We might put it like this. Everybody is forming a character. Yeah? Everybody is constructing a soul, badly or beautifully, on purpose or by accident, with God's help or on your own. Everybody builds a house. Everybody builds a life. We do this mostly by the choices we make, most of which we just don't think about. How will I spend my time? What words will I speak? What are the thoughts that will occupy my mind? And where will those thoughts come from? Where shall they come from? What shall I do with my money? What people shall form and shape me? You thinking about that? What shall day after day after day after day of my life go towards building? And very often we deal with this by trying to put decisions off. Should I work on my marriage that I know at some level is in trouble? Shall I deal with this habit I know is a deep flaw? Should I care for my body? Should I address this drinking problem that at some level I know is serious? Then, not to decide becomes its own decision with its own consequences. It's just that way. Everybody builds a house, and you cannot avoid this. I cannot abdicate responsibility for this. I cannot pass this off on my parents or my peers or my boss or my family. It's built mostly on not what has happened to me, which is what I often focus on, but those tiny, tiny little decisions I'm making or not making all of the time. Everybody builds a house. A second constant is everybody faces a storm. Everybody faces a storm. This is not a storm. This is not a story, about storm avoidance. The words we've just read. It's not about storm avoidance. We wish it was. There's no way. Let me say this slowly. There is no way to do storm avoidance. We wish there was. Not by having more money or being really, really smart. Not even by having a lot of faith in God and praying really hard and boldly. Jesus says the storm will come. To everybody. Will come. Everybody faces a storm. Somehow they surprise us though. We think we shouldn't. We think we're so smart or so strong. The strength of the storm will reveal the foundation of the house. Now, you should know that in Jesus' story, he's not just talking about problems in general. He has something in particular in mind. In the Bible, a storm is often used as an image of the judgment of God. How God does not intend to let this world continue going on being messed up. He will disrupt it and he will set things right. That's the message of the Bible. And the story of Noah and the storm and the flood, if you remember that, is an expression of the judgment of God on a messed up world, on a wicked world. That's the idea behind Jesus' storm in these two stories. In the Bible, it says that every human being is appointed to die once. Whatever you think about this, every human being is appointed to live once. We didn't get here because you chose to. It's appointed that you and I will die and then face the judgment of God. I will be accountable to God for my life. I just will. Every once in a while, something happens in my life where somehow a part of what I had done becomes revealed or accountable to other people, and that can be pretty sobering to me. Imagine standing before God and having to stand before Him and be accountable. Everybody builds a house. Everybody faces the storm. The variable in the story is this, is what foundation you build your life on. Yeah? You will build you'll either build your life on obedience to Jesus, identifying with Him, and by the grace of God doing what He said with His help, or you will, in your attitudes, in your words, in your actions, in your relationships, and with your money, do something else. What's your choice? I need to tell you this. Half measures availed us nothing. See, my problem is I would prefer half measures. We just would. I'd like a little surrender when I feel like it. I'd like a little devotion. I'd like a little generosity. I'd like a little help from God when I needed it. And then I'd also like a little distance from God when I want it. But you cannot live in a half a house or in a half a house. And so, rock or sand, follow or not follow, this is the great commitment now today that God will set before you, every one of us, through Jesus. And it's important that this commitment, if it is made, be made soberly and clearly and not in a moment of temporary emotion. Jesus' advice on this Even in the Gospel of Luke, when he tells another story about a little building project, is this: count the cost. Count the cost. Before you decide, count the cost as best as you can. So I want to give you a moment to do that this afternoon. Okay, you didn't think we were going to do this. Really, there are two costs to count, right? One of them is the cost of discipleship. And that's a wonderful phrase from a great Christian by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I've quoted him a lot over the years. And I'd like to ask you right now, in this moment of decision, that you count the cost of being a disciple. There will be a cost. What does it mean for me to surrender my will to Him? What does it mean for me to lay down my ego and my reputation? And very often there will be something in particular, a habit or a relationship, something that I would have to give up. Maybe it's around money. Maybe it's around sexuality. It's often that way for people. Anger, words. Now, the cost is not that I will just try grudgingly every day really hard through my willpower to obey Jesus' rules. The idea is that I identify with Him. Yeah? And through His grace and by the power of His Holy Spirit, I arrange my life now around practices, around relationships and rhythms through which I receive true inner goodness, through which I receive life and grace from the Heavenly Father. And of course, it's a lot like getting married. Anybody ever get married here? Hey? Did you know everything that marriage entailed the day you got married? Not even close. It's a lot like getting married or having a child, where there's a lot you don't know at the beginning, but as best as you can, you count the cost of being a disciple for you. And then, much less often talked about, there's the cost. This is the second cost, the cost of non-discipleship. What is the price you will pay if you do not follow this man? And for me, that life would be a crushing burden of chronic disappointment, of aloneness, of isolation, of enslavement to ego and desire and image and reputation. Just a little soap opera of a life every day. Fear, greed, fear, greed, fear, greed, every single day. Will I get what I want today? And then despair and meaninglessness. For me, the cost of discipleship is exceedingly small compared to the cost of non-discipleship. Now, as I bring this to a close, that counting of the cost that I talked about lies before every single one of us. With this as clearly before the mind as God will allow you right now comes the question of decision. Will you follow this man? When Jesus was teaching, all of those people listening to him on the sermon on that mountainside, something happened deep in the souls of the people who were sitting there. Something that's going to be happening for some of you right now. God works this way. I know He does. Their hearts started pounding, their minds start racing, and something inside of them says, this is it. This is what it's all about. This is what I've been looking for my whole life long, but I didn't know it until now. To be cleansed and forgiven of all my guilt and regret and the stupid stuff that I've done, through the grace poured out on the cross in His sacrificial death, to know God. To have a life that has something beyond just worry and fear, to not be a slave all of the time to my desire for sex or safety or money or image or reputation, to be a part of my own tiny little way of God's plan in His great world, to have confidence beyond death. I must have this. I must have this. I'd rather have what this man has and give up everything else in the world than to have everything there is to have in the world and give up this man. And so I've made up my mind. I'll pay whatever the price is gladly, and I'll do what he says. I'll go where he wants me to go. I'll be what he says I ought to be. And they left the crowd and would become a disciple of this man. They would become a follower of this man. They would identify with him. They would love him. They would walk through life as his friend imperfectly. Have you done that? Or have you not? Where do you stand? We're going to have a time for you to count the cost and talk with God about this right now. And again, it's not, am I a Christian or will I go to heaven? But have I become his disciple? That's the question to ponder. And so maybe you're ready to make this decision today. Take a moment or two right now. Will you bow your heads and close your eyes right where you're at? And just in the quietness of your own heart, just talk to God. Talk to Jesus today. Give him your response as honestly as you can, just to his grand invitation.